All right, we're going to catch up with our guy, Michael Carpenter. Been a while since we have done this, but Mike Carpenter, I get to call you teacher, husband, dog dad, podcaster, now author. Mike Carpenter.
I like that. Yeah, man. All these years, I mean, I became an English teacher. We did the radio show. We each got our degree in news editorial journalism. I started a Substack in March, but everyone's got a Substack, so that's not really an accomplishment. And I just thought, summer vacation hit and I needed something to do. And I thought, well, I want to write a book. And then it's just a question of write what you know. And I felt like I know Illini basketball. So once I figured out kind of the structure of things, I wrote a book.
Yeah, everybody around me knows, like, I eventually want to write a book, but I feel like I got to be inspired by a story, right? Like, I got to be inspired by a story that I want to write. Like, I've had an opportunity to write some like Illinois things, like kind of old school. Yeah, I don't know, just kind of compilation stuff about Illinois. And I'm just not inspired about that. So the 200 level, an Illinois Fighting Illini basketball fan's journey, which Carp has right there.
I'm sorry, on the screen there.
Great cover. Love it.
Thank you.
So what was the inspiration behind this?
The inspiration behind it is kind of an offshoot of the podcast, which for people that listen to it know, it is very much the fans' perspective, at least mine. I don't pretend to speak for all fans, but I'm a townie. I through and through, Illini basketball has been basically in my blood since I was 3-4 years old and went to the then Assembly Hall. And the one thing that people have always remarked about, and you and Lon would even do this back at the radio station, is I would remember, let's say, what the weather was like on a given day, right? And I in a way, this is going to sound really cliche, but I've kind of been writing this book my whole life, meaning all these anecdotes and all these reflections and experiences, like that's what's in the book. It's essentially, when I started typing, it was just recalling all the things that I might have made a passing reference to you guys about when you mentioned a certain year or a certain game. So it was really just trying to create a document that for Illini basketball fans, if they wanted to go back to the Henson or the Kruger or the Self years, or all the way up to 2024, they could reflect on their own experiences while watching these games. And already a few people that have gotten the pre-orders have said, man, I forgot about this, or I forgot about that. I remember where I watched the 05 Elite Eight game against Arizona, who I was with, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the impetus of it.
No, what I loved about when we would be on the radio together is you do have that fan perspective. I didn't really grow up with Illinois Fighting Illini sports. I got into it when my brother went to school, which is the early 2000s. So I started kind of getting into it there. But most of my knowledge is as somebody who's been a reporter. So I brought that. But you're right. Like, there'd be certain times like I covered this game. I don't remember anything about it. And you remember the day, the weather, what you did before the game, what you did after the game. Mm-hmm. Why have you had that? Like, what do you think it is about Illinois that's like these chapters of your life?
There's two things in my life that I have that for. It's sporting events and it's concerts. Yeah. So the same way that I can recall what happened against Michigan in 2002, I can recall Dave Matthews closed Alpine 2005 with like that kind of thing where people probably rolled their eyes at it. We used to get, oh God, who was it? The guy from Danville who used to call James from Danville, or James from Urbana, who always gave me crap about Dave and my kind of like encyclopedic knowledge about that. But I think those two things, the reason that they can get so locked into my brain with all the sensory details around it is that those are the things that quite simply I look forward to the most. From a young age, it was music and sports. And I knew I couldn't play sports, so I better get good at watching it and talking about it. And music, I could actually kind of practice a little bit. But this is just, it was easy enough to recall so many of those things, because whether it be conversations with family and friends or what we did for, 8-9 years on the radio, I had plenty of practice with it. The only difference was actually kind of transcribing it and then putting it from the mental chambers that it was in and actually getting it onto a page.
Yes, so take me through. As a writer, I'm fascinated by process. What was your process in putting this all to the page?
Okay, so the process first was figuring out the structure. Well, first off, what was I going to write about? And the initial thing I was bandying about was, is it just going to be Illini sports, like a compendium of all my Illini sports knowledge? But I realized that it would be so heavy on basketball and a little bit light on football. And I'm not to disparage the football program, but it's been slim pickings over the course of my life, right? I could pick 5 good seasons since I've really become a fan. Basketball, kind of an embarrassment of riches if you think about it, despite a decade or so that wasn't good. But the thing I had to figure out structurally, how was I going to write this book? Was I going to have a chapter for every season? Wouldn't really work because quite simply, some seasons aren't worth writing about to the same extent. So the first thing I wrote was a chapter about the 2001 team. Bill Self's first year, Elite Eight run. One of my favorite Illini teams, Corey Bradford, was on it, of course, my guy, among many others. And once I got that chapter down, I just went back to the Henson 90s and worked my way chronologically and struck a balance between chapters that focused on an era and chapters that focused on a particular season. And that was the trickiest thing, I think, was figuring out, okay, how much time are you going to devote to a season or to an era, and which ones especially deserve highlighting over others?
So as you're going back through all of this, are you researching to put yourself back in these moments, or is it all coming off your head? Like, how did you go about that?
For me, the research was quite simply box scores and the occasional game story, which I would then quote the author and the newspaper that was published in. But the box scores were particularly helpful because there's a lot of things, for instance, in the 05 Elite Eight game against Arizona, there was a 15-point deficit with 4 minutes to go. And that's what everybody talks about. And of course, that's a pretty remarkable thing to come back from. What I discovered upon going back and checking the box score play by play, it was an 8-point deficit with a minute to go. To me, that's even more incredible. A 3-possession deficit with a minute to go. And then, of course, it was tied within 20 seconds later. So pretty incredible stuff. But it was things like that where going back through the box scores and even getting down to the play-by-play. And also, less to remind myself about Illini players. For the most part, that was there. But there were certain names in other Big Ten teams that were, for whatever reason, over the course of time, the names kind of became blurry.
In that game, in that Arizona game, Channing Frye was amazing.
Channing Frye, Hassan Adams was the guy. And I recall distinctly Channing Frye. I knew he hit a 3 to go up 12, and that was when I had a bit of a temper tantrum, let's say. But Hassan Adams was the guy that game. Salim Stoudemire was fine for what he was that year, but it was really those two guys. And that was a really good Arizona team that just 2 days before snuck by 3-seed Oklahoma State by a single point, which I had forgotten about that. So I think for me, it was going back through the box scores. It was checking not just our game results and year by year, but actually going back to, let's say, Michigan State in 2000-2001, the team that we shared the Big Ten title with. Well, how late in the season did it go before Illinois finally had to clinch it? Well, it was the final game of the year because Michigan State didn't lose a game after they lost at the Assembly Hall in February. So it was things like that fortunately, just the treasure trove of things that are on the internet, so easily accessible. Box scores was the primary thing that I went back to.
Was there any player that you started to think about that you hadn't thought about in a long time? Like, was there Drew Neitzel in there or anything like that?
He's not in the book. Duane is in the book. There were certain other guys. I think Wisconsin draws my ire for a good few pages. Things like Andre Hudson, Michigan State. He was a big for them that was okay. But for the most part, it's kind of funny. There was a bit of a blind spot, I'd say, that corresponded with when Illinois struggled. And I think that's it. As a Bears fan, you can probably relate.
Yeah.
When they are not as good, it's harder for me to get latched on to fantasy football or how other teams are doing. If the Bears are doing well, though, I'm so fully invested in the NFL. So the same kind of goes for college basketball. My blind spots correspond with the lean years.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now with Major League Baseball, if you can believe it or not. Carp.
Oh, yeah.
White Sox. So what do you hope fans get out of this, Carp, as they pick it up and read it? What do you hope? How do you hope they connect with it?
I think that there is a bit of a nostalgia IV drop. Okay, so there is that, and if that's fan servicey or here's a cookie, you're going to enjoy this. That's fine because it's sports. It should be fun. It should be an opportunity for people to go down memory lane. I also wanted to tap into what I think is a very unique fan base in general. There is an overriding theme, let's say a cloud over this book that's otherwise very celebratory, that acknowledges the fact that this basketball program has one big matzo ball out there. It's got to get it. It's got to get that national title. And I point out a specific anecdote, how I was at the Breslin Center this year, and Michigan State was down by as many as, I think, 12, 13 in that game. It looked like Illinois was going to get a big road win. And yet I did not sense among that Breslin Center crowd the same level of angst that I do if Illinois is trailing by 4 at home. Which is to say that we are a fan base that loves this basketball program, that's very passionate about it, and yet there is that sort of Red Soxian pre-2004 albatross that's kind of hanging over things. So it is by no means does that color the entire book or the tone of it, but I do think that it shows, there's a lot of skin in the game from Illini basketball fans, and obviously for me because I wrote the thing, but part of our identity until it isn't is that we are the winningest program to not win a national title. But it does end, I think, on a hopeful note, because truly since the Self era, I haven't been this excited about the long-term prospects of what Brad Underwood and this program are capable of.
I want to ask you that. Why didn't you wait until, hey, maybe 4 years from now, Brad Underwood wins the title? Why'd you want to write it after the Elite Eight appearance?
That's a good question. A bit of striking while the iron is hot, and that sounds a little silly when it was just an Elite Eight run.
But maybe optimistic too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that people, and you could probably see this through your the YouTube chats and things like that whenever basketball does come up. Like when you and Derek do a podcast, this is such a far cry from the things we talked about 7-8 years ago when I would not have written the book. Because in a weird way, when things are not going well, the last thing I want to do, and I would still do this on occasion, but I try to caution myself from playing Remember When, because it felt like a bit of a futile exercise when you were not relevant. It felt like, wow, are we really going back to the 04-05 season? It's 2015 and we stink. And it was something kind of, in a word, depressing about that. Mm-hmm. So I think the reason to do it now, one, it was just I wanted something to do, to be fully transparent. And that was my month of June, was drafting this thing. And then secondly, just the overall temperature of the fan base right now seems to be so much healthier, even just after making the Elite Eight. No, it was not a Final Four. You don't raise a banner for the Elite Eight. But I think what it did was show that, hey, yes, we are capable of winning games in March, which was the one remaining question about Brad Underwood. And the way that things seem to be pointing upwards in this new ever-changing landscape of college basketball, it feels like Illinois basketball is kind of primed in a way that most other Big Ten schools are not. Now, that's not to say it's a guarantee. And that's why maybe I didn't wait either, because if I sat here and said, I'm going to wait for a Final Four or a national title, then honestly, I might never write it because you just don't know. Yeah. But it felt like a time where people were maybe ready to, now that we feel good about it again, go back to other things in the past and not feel like it was kind of a cheap thing to do.
Carp, you're one of the most passionate Illinois fans I know. Wear the emotions on the sleeve, for better or worse. No. And you ride the highs, ride the lows. I mean, we were on radio. That was as low as it got. With Illinois basketball. So going through this, have you done like hey, what does this program mean to me? Why do I care so much? Like, why am I so passionate about this?
Yeah, sure. I think that was something I had not always vocalized. So we would talk about the big games or the big moments, but I didn't, and I don't know how good a radio it would have been to say, this is why Illinois basketball means so much to me. And it's not so far back as like my grandparents, because my grandparents were not super into sports. A couple were U of I alums, but for the most part, they were just local people. It was my dad. I mean, my dad got season tickets in '78, pretty good year to get them. Mm-hmm. And he saw the ascension of the Henson era. And we started going to games in the early 90s. And my mom was always all too willing to let me go instead of her, because she could tell from a young age I was just really into it. And I think about, I'm a Yankees fan, but I can't really share that with friends and family. With my immediate family, I can, because we are, as the four of us are. But I can't hang out with a group of friends and talk about Bernie Williams, because they don't care, and why would they? But I can talk about Illini basketball. So I think it's a mix of family. It's a mix of community. I am a townie through and through. And why it means so much to me, I think, is because upon reflection with this book, I realized that so many of the great memories that I've built with the people I'm closest to, they do circle around Illini sports. And it might seem ridiculous, but if anyone were to ask in general, why are sports such a popular thing in the first place? It's because, well, why is college football so popular? Is it the games or the tailgates? I'd argue it's the tailgates and the camaraderie that you build with the people that you see every home game Saturday. Or for college basketball, it's for the people that you have over to your garage or go meet at the sports bar for the away games. That, I think, is why this means as much to me, but by no means am I unique in that. I mean, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably that feel the same way about Illini basketball.
Sure. One, it's fun. It's entertainment, right? It's part of that. But I agree with you. Just the people you meet, it brings so many people together, right? In a world where we can find ourselves so separated and lonely, like it brings people together. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to it is, I get to see these football teams of players from all across the country come together. This basketball team of players all across the world come together. And then you see all these fans come from all over the country, the state. It's awesome. And everyone's rooting for the same thing. You get to root against somebody else and you get the bragging rights and all those things. So how have you appreciated this though, run with Underwood, going through what Illinois went through, the late years of Weber, the whole Gross era, and then the beginning of the Underwood era?
I think I've had to check myself a bit during the Underwood era. And to give you an example of that, early this year during the Valparaiso game, we were trailing Roger Powell Jr.'s Valparaiso team. Third game of the season. Of course, I didn't overreact at all. I'm kidding. I totally overreacted. I tweet out something along the lines of, oh, we just ran it back. Same old stuff. It all starts with the guy at the top. In my mind, because there was all this pressure post-Loyola, and I really do think that was a big line of demarcation until it wasn't, that we had somewhat stalled. We were going to be good. We were going to make tournaments under Underwood, which if you would have asked me when we hired him, is that enough? I would have said 100%. But he is the kind of coach that gave us a taste of something more, right? With the 1 seed back in 2021, with the resurgence even the year before that when COVID hit. So I think that I've kind of, go figure, went along the roller coaster as I often do, but have settled at this place of mostly gratitude, if anything, for the fact that this program that was left for dead, was really nationally irrelevant, and was one of those things where opposing fan bases would even say to themselves, remember when Illinois was good? And now we were talking like a decade's worth removed from when they were. Now we're at a point where you are consistently at the top of mind of college basketball conversations. That could be Field of 68. It goes beyond just the things that we do locally and regionally, but from a national perspective. So to me, the biggest thing that Underwood's done, and the word I'd use is appreciative, is make Illinois basketball into what they really were from, let's say, 1998 to 2005, which was a run that included 4 regular season Big Ten titles, 2 conference tournament titles, consistently making the second weekend, which I think he can get to that point. And now that we're kind of over that hump. And while I recognize there's no guarantee for Final Fours or national championships, you just continue to get bites at the apple. And the talent accrual, the fact that you just, let's go get Orlando Antigua back in here. These sorts of moves that would have been absolutely huge 4 or 5 years ago, even earlier in his tenure. Now I don't question any of them. In fact, I expect that we're going to get that recruit. I expect if we want that assistant coach, we'll go get him and we'll just get it done. Yeah. So that's a pretty remarkable place to be in, considering where we were even at the early years of the Underwood era.
Covering last March from Minneapolis all the way to Boston was something I will never forget as somebody who covers the program. What did that run mean to you?
I think it was the most fun month I've had as an Illini fan, which some would say, well, why not March 2005? The difference is March 2005, you had to make a Final Four. You had to. And that team was not playing their best ball in March. They lost at Ohio State. Was a complete shock to all of us. You beat Fairleigh Dickinson by 9. Well, you win the Big Ten tournament, ho-hum fashion. You beat Fairleigh Dickinson, you beat Nevada. Okay, fine. You get all the way past Arizona. And that was honestly, while there was a lot of joy in that, there was more a sense of relief that a team that had that gaudy record was at least going to be able to hang a Final Four banner. And I kind of knew when I woke up for the UNC game. I didn't feel it. And if you look at how stacked they were, it's understandable why the game went the way it did. The difference between that March and March of 2024, despite not making a Final Four and UConn going on a 30-0 run, whatever, it's so weird. It should bother me more than it does.
They were better than you two. Like, at least they were better.
Yeah, and then they smoked Purdue. They were that kind of team. So the reason that March 2024 might be my favorite month of all time, not that it was unexpected, because we saw at parts throughout the season, this team was capable of being a top 10 caliber team. But it was really beginning with that game at Wisconsin, where Marcus Damask went off again. And then there was the little blip against Purdue, but I didn't leave the State Farm Center after that Purdue game feeling worse. In fact, I thought, we didn't take advantage of every opportunity, but we aren't playing Purdue and we aren't playing UConn until we play them. In other words, this seems like a team that can finally get over that hump. It was the weekend in Minneapolis, I think, that stuck out. It was, I mean, the win at Iowa. We had no mental motivation like the Hawkeyes did to win that game. And we ended up beating them pretty soundly when they needed it to even get a sniff of the NCAA tournament. And then even the Duquesne game, we get to sit back and relax as we cruise our way into a Sweet 16, taking a 20-point lead within 8-9 minutes. And then the Iowa State game was probably the one, and that goes without saying, but I think that it would have been considered a very good season by just making the Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. I think by beating a 2 seed, and I think probably the weakest 2 seed, but you know what? Them's the breaks. We got a little bit lucky with that.
Well, and then you drew the toughest 1 seed, so.
Exactly. So it probably balanced out, right? Would we prefer to be in another bracket? Maybe. But I'll just point out one single play. The Terrence Shannon steal and slam was the biggest moment of catharsis I've had as an Illini basketball fan since Darren Williams hit the game tying 3.
Carp, I was standing courtside, right? I'm sitting courtside. That took my breath away. Like just as someone just observing and reporting on this team, I had to catch my breath. It was that kind of moment.
It was a moment where our garage, which became this sort of thing, and we suffered our first loss in the garage on Saturday to the Penn State game. But before that, we've been undefeated. We had this huge crew there for that Iowa State game. Blew the microphones out. I mean, the distortion that you hear on the podcast and the human pogo sticks, just absolute crazy and beyond catharsis. It was joy. So like when you ask, why do we get so into this? Why do we get so passionate? It's in a way, it's like a drug in that you experience these major endorphin rushes and you want to experience those again. And you know, you're capable of it. So you chase it and you keep watching games season after season, waiting for that next one. And for Illini basketball, we've been spoiled the last 4 or 5 years. Not just to what we have been, but really when you consider 2 tournament banners, a regular season banner, making tournaments without even sweating Selection Sunday, most programs would kill for that. But we also aspire for something more. And that Terrence Shannon steal and slam kind of to me indicated that, we are now at a great level. Yeah. And it seems like the way that Brad Underwood's running this program, it might be sustainable. But in that moment, that was just releasing, 19 years of pent-up frustration.
So, Carp, you had this offseason where only 2 players return, 2 coaches leave, the second time in 3 years that's happened. And I'm sitting there like, whatever, Illinois will be fine. Brad Underwood has done this before. But obviously losing Tim Anderson, Chester Frazier, you bring in Orlando Antigua, but you bring in all this talent too. You get a 5-star in Will Riley. Kasparis Yakashonis is basically a 5-star. You're bringing in all these transfers. What do you think? Like, what's kind of your attitude after this kind of crazy offseason that had some departures, but also a bunch of interesting additions?
My approach, I think they're going to be really good, which is not, I know, crazy analysis. I think the idea is, and I'm going to try to practice what I preach here, but in November and December, we would expect that there's going to be a game or 2 that's kind of a stinker. Yeah. And probably against better competition, though I also wouldn't be surprised if they grab a random win against maybe not Alabama, but Tennessee at home, let's say. That seems fairly reasonable. So I think that what is exciting, and this is similar to 2 years ago, you got a bunch of new toys in the toy box. And how do they all fit together? I think the primary difference, though, was that 2 years ago, where I should have probably seen the fault with having as many freshmen that you relied on in the backcourt. I think you have a very interesting mix of mostly veteran players. And even a Kasparis Yakashonis is someone that has plenty of basketball experience that I don't think is going to play like your prototypical freshman out of an American high school. If anything, I kind of expect him to maybe be the best player on the court, which sounds ludicrous for an 18-year-old out of Lithuania, but it just seems watching the tape, he might be that good. But meanwhile, you get a Colin Boswell, who might just be a simple matter of fit. This is clearly a very, very talented guy who I think can be a great floor general for this team. A Benham Rickhouse, who, he each and every year has exponentially improved and just kind of has the profile of a guy that could sneak into the league or get a cup of coffee in the summer league or something like that. And then what's the youngest guy that's going to be the rotation? Morez Johnson, who might start at the 5 and sounds like he's having a great summer. So to me, it is who are going to be your best 5? I don't know. But I know that you have plenty of options to find your best 5. And to me, the most important thing is skill. It seems like the overriding thing that they're looking for, simplistic as it sounds, is very skilled basketball players, which is, in a way, I love Ty Rodgers, but I don't think a Ty Rodgers would be recruited to what Brad Underwood and the staff are trying to do now. He's here. They'll find a role for him. But I think now it's really focusing on a guy like a Will Riley, who, even if he were a 4-star kid, borderline top 75, 80, I think they would target him first over the 4-star Ty Rodgers out of Saginaw, Michigan. I just think it's a template they found offensively that they're recruiting to, and they're recruiting well.
So what are your expectations for this season? It's hard to kind of make those, isn't it, until we see them a little bit?
It is, but does the Big Ten, and I'll ask you this, I mean, what Big Ten teams do you look at and say certifiably they are going to be very good? And I know Indiana's an easy answer, but they're going to make the tournament.
You got a coaching advantage. I still think Purdue's going to be really good. I know they lost the best player in their history and one of the best players in college basketball history, but I side with coaches now when I'm like filling out my preseason projections. And I think Underwood and Painter certainly are in that conversation. I think Indiana's among the most talented, one or two most talented teams in the league. So they're going to be good. They'll make the tournament, in my opinion, and should be a top 6 seed. I think that's going to depend on their coaching and how they adjust to that. But Oregon's good. UCLA is good, but they're coming to a new league. Michigan's reloaded. Ohio State's reloaded. So I think Iowa's going to be sneaky, kind of feisty again. But yeah, I think they're going to be a top tier team. I'll probably have them. I'm filling out my preseason poll now. I'll probably have them 2 or 3, just based on talent.
That's my thought. And I'm not going to go in the season saying Big Ten title or bust. There's too many moving pieces in the NIL era to really do that a whole lot anymore. And
18 teams.
With 18 teams, a total crapshoot. I do think that there will be an adjustment period for the West Coast teams. And in a way, we're kind of seeing that with football, where Washington, new coach aside, clearly they're adjusting as they had to when they went to Piscataway Friday night. And even USC, which bounced back in the second half against Wisconsin. But you see a team trying to figure it out. I think the same will be with basketball. But no, I think top 3. I would be surprised if it were any lower than 5. And to me, you're a tournament team. I think we can certifiably say that. It's just that the ceiling is what's so exciting about this team. Now, it's completely unknown, and we don't know what that looks like. But the good news is that even if a couple of these guys you strike out on and they don't end up panning out for whatever reason, well, right now I'm looking at a roster that's 8 or 9 deep, at least according on paper, and that can always change. I feel like you will mix and match your way to finding a 7-man rotation, worst case scenario, that can compete with anybody in the Big Ten. I'd say top 3, and I would not at all be surprised if they won the Big Ten title.
Yeah, I think their floor would be like 7th or 8th in the Big Ten, which is a tournament team, right? But then they'd be like a dangerous, team in the tournament that a 1 or 2 seed wouldn't want to see in the second round, kind of like Arkansas a couple of years ago, just because there's too much NBA talent. Like Will Riley and Yakashonis are definitely going to be in the NBA someday, most likely. Kylan Boswell's got a chance to be there. Kerry Booth, who might be your 7th or 8th guy, 9th guy, might be an NBA kind of talent. So I'm with you. Plus, you got a coach that knows what he's doing. And offensively, what they are doing right now with Tyler Underwood, Zach Hamer, and their assistants, like they're putting together good stuff and putting these guys in positions to succeed. As you said, Carp, they have a plan now, and they recruit to that plan.
Which I love. I love when there's a template that's set the same way we talked about Wisconsin, Iowa football. They had a template, recruit linemen, and build from there. And then with us, offense wins. And I know UConn did have a really good defense to go with that, but ultimately their offense was so efficient that you couldn't stop them. You just couldn't. They were going to outscore you even if they didn't have their best defensive game. One more point too, and I know it's so premature to say this, I think the schedule's favorable. I really do. The way that Big Ten schedule kind of shakes out, and it's always such a silly exercise to play. Well, what's the record going to be? I don't know. But when I looked at it, the one thing that struck me was there was not an extended stretch of time, a 4 or 5 game stretch, let's say, where I said, oh, that's the make it or break it stretch. It seemed like there were always these, every other game, there'd be, oh, that looks like a bit of a breather. Oh, cool. Northwestern at home after you got to have and I don't remember specifics, but the West Coast road trip, early January. Mm-hmm. And then you get about 4 or 5 days off before you play your next game. It's little things like that I thought, I don't see the scheduling disadvantage.
While you're in school, or while you're out of school on winter break. Right. That's a good thing to have. And plus, you don't waste those games at home during winter break for that. So, yeah, I think they're going to be good. And it's good. I'm going to have fun just the process of this team, Carp, because I do think they're going to get challenged a lot in this non-conference, which is why Brad Underwood scheduled it. And that's another upside, though. Like, your losses in the non-conferences, assuming you don't drop when you're not supposed to, they're not going to hurt you. They're only going to help your strength of schedule and help you get ready for Big Ten play. So I love that Brad is scheduling the way he is. One, because it's entertaining. Two, this is what you should be doing. This is what Michigan State did. This is what Tom Izzo did. Like, I think it's a sign of Illinois as a program that they're able to schedule these kind of games.
Just Thanksgiving Day alone. What a dream. I get to watch the Bears and Lions, and then immediately, without even have to worry about, I never watch the Cowboys game. It's on, but I'm never really sitting down and watching the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. It doesn't do it for me. So CBS just goes, all right, we'll see you from Detroit. Now we're kicking it out to Kansas City. And here's a game with Underwood versus Coach Cal, Illinois versus Arkansas, national television. It won't get NFL numbers, but it's going to get a few million at least. And to me, it's just a sign of, Underwood, I think, taking the Izzo model of really stacking your non-conference is something he should do going forward, because I think that no matter who you stack up against, you will never know fully beforehand what your opponent's roster is even going to look like until probably July 1st. And the same goes for Illinois. So I think it's a chance worth taking. And I think more often than not, you're going to line up a roster that's as good as the other top 10 non-conference team that you put on your schedule. I say go for it, and I'm glad to see he's starting to do that.
Just to kind of wrap up the basketball conversation before I ask you a little bit about football, since they are off to a pretty dang good start.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to me that the start of your book, or what you started, the first chapter that you worked on, was about the Self era in 2001. And it's probably weird for kids that are about a generation younger than us, Carp, that Illinois and Michigan State were like 1A, 1B in the Big Ten, right? And Illinois actually was winning more in the Big Ten than Tom Izzo, but Izzo won the national championship. Then Weber gets here, and obviously it goes downhill, and Izzo becomes the dean of the Big Ten, and they're the powerhouse for a really, really long time. Now Illinois is like that, right? It's Illinois and Purdue now, but Illinois is kind of finally being back to that. That wasn't an easy thing to accomplish, and now with the schedule that they have, man, like they're kind of the Michigan State of the late 2000s and 2010s here.
I'm not going to hijack this segment, but I found the passage in the book about that very thing, because my wife's a Michigan State. My wife is a Michigan State alum.
Yeah,
and I always felt like such a mansplainer when I would say, "Well, back in the day, we used to be equals." Can you imagine? But there's this one paragraph I was talking about, the Paint the Hall Orange game in 2001, and why it was such a seminal moment that we circled on the schedule right when it came out, but. Between 1998 and 2005, no Big Ten team won more regular season championships than Illinois, 5, or conference tournament championships, 2, and Michigan State also won a pair. Only Michigan State had more conference wins than Illinois through that period, 99, though Illinois' total of 90 was significantly hampered by 1999's 3-win season. So in other words, yes, from 1998 through 2005, you were equals in Big Ten play. Now, the key difference, of course, they won a national title. They made, I think, 3 other Final Fours, and that's why Tom Izzo is a college basketball Hall of Famer. One funny thing, too, about, Bill Self is so long ago for Illini fans. I spoke to an Illinois sports journalism class, and I showed them a picture of me interviewing Self back in 2003. Not a single kid could pick out that it was Bill Self, and he does look younger.
Yeah.
But when I told them that, there was this audible gasp in the crowd, because he's that kind of guy that carries that much cachet. So, yeah, that was it went beyond him, though. I mean, Lon Kruger kind of built that, and then Bruce Weber, to his credit, for the first few years, had that rolling, too.
Yeah. All right, Carp. Illinois football. Operation Prolonged Relevancy is really working under Brett Bielema. Like, what we had clamored for Illinois was to just, hey, don't make October all about preseason basketball, right? Let's entertain us. I mean, Illinois is a solid Big Ten football team, and 4-0 start, two ranked wins. I know Kansas is not holding up, but I still think that Nebraska win was big, and Kansas was a good win. You go to Penn State, you have a chance to win. They just kind of overwhelmed you with talent, and you made too many mistakes. But give me your thoughts. Like, what are you thinking a month into the Illinois football season, and they only need to win 2 of their last 7 to get to a bowl game?
Shocked is too strong of a word, maybe, but I mean, I don't know, maybe not. I thought 6-6 before the season, and that was because I didn't want to let my disappointment with last season color my prediction based on emotion. Last season was bad. It really was. It was a terrible step back for a program that, man, if they just would have won a game or 2 more, we're feeling great. But as it is, to this Illini fan base's credit, I think the Kansas game was such a big moment, because the way that they showed up for that game in the stands and in the parking lots, it felt like they were saying to the coaching staff, you guys talked about this. you guys are better. We're going to give you this shot. Don't mess it up. Get the win, and we're on board. And not, it was not a perfect game, and Kansas has certainly taken a step back. But I think that what's most impressed me with this start to the season, every single game, you can kind of see what the long play is for this coaching staff. So I'll give you an example. And this is, I think, a recurring thing. Defensively, they know they aren't elite. So what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to make sure that you got to go 12, 13, 14 plays. We're going to elongate drives and hope you make a mistake. And guess what? College football teams tend to make a lot of mistakes. Just be the one that makes the fewest of them. I think offensively, Barry Lunny's really come into his own. Even after Penn State, I'm not worried about him. I felt like the line put you such a disadvantage. No play caller could have.
Yeah,
penalties too. Yeah. So to me, the 4-1 start is so reassuring because it kind of shows what we've been talking about so long with what a Brett Bielema coached team would look like. And I said this from the outset in 2020, December 2020, when he was hired, that just make fewer mistakes than the opponent, and you're going to win a good handful of games. They took advantage of, I think, a more favorable schedule than you would have thought, with Kansas not being quite as good. But the Nebraska win, to me, was so consequential because it showed that this team went beyond just merely not making mistakes. Kind of like the Kansas fourth quarter, they went out and they won that game late with key play after key play. And let's keep it simple, too. You have a quarterback. I know it wasn't great at Penn State. You have a quarterback, though, that's going to win you games against most teams with defenses not stacked with 4 and 5 star talent, which other than Michigan, maybe Oregon, I don't see who that is on the schedule. So I think it just bodes well, not just for this season, but for a team loaded with juniors. It bodes well for next season, too, and I think it's showing recruits that this is kind of what we're doing.
I think you're really seeing the experience of last year pay off. With Luke, guys like Miles Scott, Xavier Scott. I know Dylan Rosiak didn't play all that well against Penn State. That's a tough game for him. But even guys like Seth Coleman, Gabe Akis, I just think that is showing through. And I think, they went out and got some guys in the portal. Zachary Franklin has been huge for them. Dennis Briggs has been big for them. The tackles, I know, again, Penn State coming to Penn State, they've been huge. To find 2 starting tackles in the Big Ten that you feel are solid and can play at the next level potentially, like, they went out and got some dudes in the portal, which is what they need to continue to do, because you see the difference last week of what a top 10 team is and what a top 25-ish team is, right? That doesn't have a lot of depth. They need to keep doing that. But the process has been so sound. Bielema is so organized. He hires good coaches, and you're seeing him coach good coaches. Like Aaron Henry has certainly gotten better. And you're right, Carp, instead of, man pressing everybody this year and daring them throwing one-on-one coverage when he doesn't have the talent, he's like, okay, now we're going to maybe sit back in a little bit more zone and make you beat us. And, we're going to change things up a little bit and disguise things a little bit better and make you go 12 plays. Cause it's hard for college teams to do that, like you said. So, and Barry Lunny, I think, is just a really good offensive coordinator. We can nitpick certain things, but I didn't have a big problem with anything he did at Penn State. I thought he had his best game against Nebraska, and he's developed his quarterback incredibly well. So I think they're doing really well.
And that's just it. Talk about nitpick. I mean, we're at a place now where we can nitpick. I think the biggest moment against Penn State, which was very frustrating at the time, and maybe in hindsight, the game goes differently. There's the bad snap on the 1st and goal from the 2. And that can't happen. Weird that was the first time it's happened with recruits all season long at the worst possible time.
That's why I can't sit there and go play call. But
I will say that then I thought the decision making, this is my one nitpick of the game, to be quite honest. I thought the decision-making after that was flawed, because I would have actually done the old conservative, run the clock down, kick the field goal. Going to halftime up 10-7, I'm feeling great. But what happened was, I think a loss on 2nd down forces you into 3rd and long. You have a decision with Penn State with 0 timeouts. Yeah. You run it to the middle of the hash marks and you kick a 35-yarder or something like that, going to halftime with a 10-7 lead. But then again, is that ultimately going to make the difference in the game after the mistake at the 2-yard line? I don't know. So again, we're in a place where nitpicking, as opposed to, oh my God, everything's incompetent, which is what it used to be. It did.
Right. Like, 3rd down, maybe just run it and kick a field goal. But still, like, that was a tough grounding penalty, right? And you get one-on-one with Pat Bryant on a wheel route. Like, I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of it. And then there's a 3rd down pitch to Caden Fagan that I think it was 4 down territory. That was right before the 4th and 1. And then you have a penalty to make it 4th and 6, though. Like, I didn't mind it, because if you get 3 yards of Caden Fagan, you're 4th and 2. And Barry Lunny's been awesome in like those short, goal line, red zone kind of situations. I know it was midfield, but there's some reason behind it. And I feel like you just didn't execute some of those things, and he has executed a lot of those things. So I like the direction they're going, but you got to beat Purdue, man. Like you have to beat Purdue with the train wreck that is happening over there. And I respect the heck out of Ryan Walters, but firing your offense coordinator 16 games into your tenure is really a statement about how that thing is going so far. You have to take care of business against that one, because you get to 5-1, Carp, that back half of the season, you're thinking, all right, 8-9 wins. What if we upset one of Oregon or Michigan? Maybe we can get to 10 wins and get this college football playoff. But if you lose to Purdue, all of a sudden it's like, is this a bowl bubble in November?
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you will.
I don't know.
And the reason I say that, Purdue's not just bad. They're one of the worst Big Ten teams in the last decade. According to the metrics and everything, they're a bad MAC school, essentially.
2010's Illinois bad.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think what you're seeing, and I don't wish it on Ryan Walters, but at the same time, listen, when you're a fan, and there was some of the bravado that he had upon getting that job where it's like, oh, I see. And they kicked our butt last year. It seems like such a long time coming. And to me, it actually seems like perfect timing for two factors. One, their offensive coordinator, the high school coach, whatever, is getting his first experience up at Wisconsin. So it's not going to be one of those fluky, first time play call at Illinois.
I thought he might wait a week, to be honest with you, to be like, we don't want Illinois to know what we're doing.
No, it would have been so aggravating in much the same way that I recall 2 years ago. One of the worst sports days of my life was when Purdue came here on that cloudy, rainy day. And it was even before the pass interference on Devin Witherspoon, where Devin Maccabee was getting 6 yards a carry. Yeah. No problem. This walk-on running back, and I could just sense in my bones this was not a good day, or it didn't appear to be. So that's one. The offensive coordinator will be in the second game. He'll have some tape on him if it even matters.
I'm still waiting, Carp, by the way, for Graham Harrell to be announced as an Illinois analyst.
It'll happen. And imagine the number of recruits that will probably be invited to that game, which is just what you have to do. I mean, you have to take advantage of this, and I think he will. Brett Bielema likes some gamesmanship. The second thing is this, bye week. And this is one thing that would I prefer to beat Penn State, of course. I actually think as far as the loss is concerned, though, it's a little bit of the best of both worlds. You didn't get hurt, but also, and you and Jay were talking about this on the podcast today, where it's both a mix of, on one hand, you could say, we aren't in their league. And then the other hand, you could say, but we were within a touchdown in the fourth quarter. We had a chance to tie it. I think it's actually the perfect kind of mindset to go into a bye week, coupled with the fact that Smith Performance Center has to be bubbling with anger about the last 3 years against Purdue. It kept you out of 2 bowl games, and it kept you out of Indy in 2022. Mm-hmm. Quite simply, one stinking team did that. So I think that bodes well for, I don't want to say this because I'm going to be at the game, and if it starts off with a 7-0 Purdue lead, I'm going to be thinking to myself, oh my dear God. But I think it actually sets up for more than just a win against Purdue. I think it sets up for pour it on them kind of game.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like Nebraska, they should have won 42-10, or at least like 37-10. Like they should have made 3 field goals. Like they dominated that game. They just kept shooting themselves in the foot in that first half.
And by the way, I think the Nebraska one's going to stick.
I think it's a good team. Dylan Raiola is really good. He's really good.
And I think Matt Rule's a good coach that will kind of have a Bo Pelini-esque tenure, but just more likable or less unlikable, shall we say. But I do think that they were probably like a 7. Well, I think 7-5. They have some tough road games coming up, but I would be surprised if they go 8-4. I think that's just a straight up quality win. And you saw in the second half, finally Nebraska, after gaining plenty of yards in the first half, they took care of business against Purdue. And to me, if any game would have seemed like the last gasp for Ryan Walters, I kind of felt like it would have been that. At Wisconsin, I don't see anything in that game that's going to conjure up any mojo for Purdue coming into Champaign.
If I told you 8 wins, would you be happy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is how I think it'll probably shake out, because we are a good team, but we're not great.
Yeah. Which
means we are prone to a stinker. But Brett Bielema's teams are also prone to winning a game that maybe they should. And you could say maybe the Nebraska game was that. I thought coming into the season, the biggest quality one would be Kansas. And then if you were just scratched the rest of the way, you'd be 7-5. Nebraska win put you above that projection. And to me, I could see something where you lose to Minnesota at home, but you beat Rutgers on the road. Yeah. I think the key thing, though, is going to be if you beat Purdue and you go to 5-1, I would imagine Vegas would still have Michigan as like a 3.5, 4.5 point favorite. It's still Michigan, and I know they can't throw it, but I saw the Ohio State stripe the stadium game in 2011. They didn't have to throw it either. When you got the guys on the line, sometimes you don't, and I'm not going to go into that game expecting Illinois to win by 17 points. But if you were 5-1 going into that game, there is an intangible quality to all these stars aligning, 100th anniversary game, Red Grange uniforms, presumably sold-out crowd, in much the same way the Kansas game and the lots beforehand had this vibe of, yeah, we're going to get it done. I mean, I had not felt that in a long time. There was this weird air of confidence amongst the fan base. I'd imagine it'd be the same for the Michigan game, and I can only imagine how pumped that locker room would be, knowing the opportunity right in front of them. They're a good enough team, I think, that they could beat Michigan on a neutral field 4 or 5 times out of 10, the way that these two teams are constructed right now. With everything behind them, that game 5-1, it would be hard for me to pick against Illinois.
The problem is Michigan is loaded in the trenches, as you know, especially on the defensive line. They got top 5 pick in the draft and Will Johnson at corner. They're loaded on defense. They're a physical, good running team. So I'll try to do to you what Penn State did. But they got a quarterback problem, and Illinois doesn't. Now, Illinois has a quarterback. So if you can find a way to get to 17, 20 points, you might have a chance to win that game. It just can you score on them is going to be the big key, because that offensive line is going to have their work cut out for them. Because as great as Penn State is, Michigan's defensive line might be as good or better. But I agree with the Carp. You feel like you have a chance going into that kind of game, and think about how much progress that is.
There was a time before the season where, we're doing these garage tailgates for the away games now, and the Oregon game, I believe, is October 26th or something like. Well, yeah, October 26th, the week after Michigan. And Carrie has some family that are going to be in town, and she was like, "Oh, I mean, this is 2 months ago," and it was like, "That's the Oregon game. We can do whatever that day. It's probably not going to be worth watching." Of course, it's going to be worth watching. I would be actually surprised at this point if Illinois goes into Oregon and loses 31-10. That would actually kind of surprise me with the way this team is. Penn State, to me, felt close. It was on the precipice of getting away from you. And Vegas, it felt like midway through the third quarter, Vegas was spot on. Mm-hmm. There was that big of a discrepancy there. But I do think that the way that you play ball, and the fact that I would imagine, just like last year, the offensive line will continue to get better. And I think we've seen positive signs from them earlier this season than we did last season. It took until week 6 or 7. Yeah. That bodes well more for the Michigan game and the Oregon game. But to me, it's as simple as, if you get one of Michigan, Oregon, Rutgers, then I feel like 9 is right there. Because I feel like we're getting one of those. I'm less worried about a Minnesota at home or Michigan State at home. And certainly not Purdue, and right now not Northwestern.
Carp, you've had tickets there for a long time. I'm wondering, what do you think an 8-win season plus 9-win season would mean for filling that stadium? Because with the revenue sharing coming up, boy, that's important. That is really important. And I do think we're going to see a sold-out crowd for Michigan. I think they were within a couple thousand the last I checked. I don't know if Purdue's going to get there, because you're not going to get probably a lot of Purdue fans to come over here. But I think you're going to have 50,000, maybe 55,000 for that one. So what do you think that would mean for the football fan base to have 2 years of winning seasons under Brett Bielema and 2 other competitive seasons at least?
I think you have them hooked at that point. I think, as I mentioned before, all the juniors on this team, specifically the quarterback, like, I don't know if Luke is ever going to get Heisman consideration. He could have a great year this year, but I don't think even Kurt Kittner got a little national attention going into his senior year, but nothing crazy. To me, though, it's a mix of, okay, 4 years in, if you go on to have the year that I think they can, given the schedule, and of course the big staying healthy, that's the big thing that will help get you there. But that's with every college football team. Let's say they finish 8-4, and regardless of what happens in the bowl game, I think that would tell fans that this is stable. What it would tell me as well is that last year, what concerned me so much about the 5-7 record and the way that you lost some of those games by kind of just falling apart was, well, maybe we're going to get Arkansas Bielema. I think you're going to get something in between Wisconsin and Arkansas Bielema. I think that speaks to the kind of program you have. You're going to have to work your way up to a Barry Alvarez type of Wisconsin thing. But in the meantime, 7-8 wins a year, we always talked about, and it's the truth, is the kind of thing that would get you a statue. Whether or not it actually would do that, it will get people in lot 31. It'll get them in all the surrounding lots. It'll get them in the stadium. And if you go 8-4 this year, I would expect a handful of sellouts, and not just the kind like Kansas where you get it a couple days before. I would anticipate going into the offseason, you sell even more season tickets, because Illini fans have always been there. even in the lean years, there was a baseline of 35,000 people. For as bad as we've been, I think that tells you that they are willing to commit. They're willing to get on board, and Bielema's program is seeming to give them plenty of reasons to do so.
I mean, you got a pretty good thing here right now with Brett Bielema and Brad Underwood, don't you? Two coaches you believe in.
I'll throw in Shauna Green. I mean, because I know it's not one of the big two. It's not the revenue generator that it is. But there was a time, briefly, where Lon Kruger, Teresa Grentz, and let's see, Ron Turner makes the 99 micron PC. There's still a little bit of shine on Teresa Grentz in the post-Ashley Bergeron phase. Lon Kruger has all these studs from Peoria coming in. And it felt like, okay, now we have like a trio that actually knows what they're doing. I mean, Illinois women's basketball, I think, received votes in one of the very preliminary women's polls at like 24-25 because of all the returning talent. And they probably will be. So that is just indicative, I think, of an overall health of the athletic program. And it's encouraging to know that your athletic director, if he were to make a move, is probably to become the next Big Ten commissioner or the head of whatever that collegiate I forget the name of the organization, but
football czar, if they ever have one, like it'd be something like that, right?
And we had these conversations. Was it Rick George, Josh Whitman? Do you take a chance? Tom Michael, former Lonnie's over at Eastern. They made the right call. And maybe it was because Rick George spurned them. I don't know. He seemed happy in Colorado, and I would have been happy with that hire. But Josh Whitman, from the jump, from his very first press conference, it was like, I think this can work. There was an it factor to him. But like with anything, it did take time, and it took a failure of a first football coaching hire, which I don't begrudge him of, because I was excited about Lovey. I think most were. But he got the first men's basketball hire right. He seems to have gotten the second football and women's basketball hires correct as well. And some of the non-revenue sports are doing pretty well on top of that. But listen, the overall fan sentiment will be based on men's basketball and football. And collectively, they're as healthy as they've been since 2000, 2001. And I think they have a higher chance, especially on north of Kirby, to be sustaining success in a way that Ron Turner clearly was never going to do.
All right, the 200 level, an Illinois Fighting Illini basketball fans' journey. Carp, how can they find the book? How can they get it?
Okay, so if you're local in Champaign-Urbana or anywhere in that area, you can get it at both Game Day Spirit locations beginning Thursday, October 3rd, or Jane Addams Bookstore and The Lit in downtown Champaign. So those are the retail stores. Shop local. If you were not local, go to Amazon, hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook, narrated by me. And if you're in the Ford County area, Game Changer Sports Shop is carrying some. So go to Just Hamburgers, get a bite to eat. Yeah. Downtown Paxton, baby. It's a new sports shop up there. And then, on Thursday night, Lon and myself will be hosting an event at Hamilton Walker's, a book talk, I guess.
Awesome.
Where, we'll be doing the front room at Hamilton Walker's. But, making the media rounds, doing Penny for Your Thoughts, doing Sports Line. Yeah, man.
Man, if I weren't going to be in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine at the time, going to see the Leafs, Carp, I would definitely be out there. I would love to hear you and Lon talk about this, man.
Well, if it's okay, I want to drop one more nugget out there, which I was going to do on my podcast this week, but I'm going to wait until Thursday to do it. So beginning in the spring, you can add another thing to my, you said, no, it's not that. I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't going there. I wasn't going there.
It's not dad. It's not dad.
Okay.
No, adjunct professor.
Look at you.
Yeah. So I'm going to be the College of Media, Intro to Sports Journalism.
Awesome.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if timing works out before like an Illini basketball game, got to have you talk to the kids.
Yeah, I've come down talked with Gene McDonald, who I loved as professor. Came down there. I love giving back to U of I College of Journalism, because I know some people can be jaded about their college experience. College media was awesome for me. Mm-hmm. Everything I got to experience there. Kent Brown had a class, and I came down and spoke to them. So anytime you need me, man, I would love that. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited for it. And it was just so cool. I gave a guest lecture inside Greg Hall in a room that I took news editing and reporting to.
Every once in a while, I'll go down in the basement, do a tour, go around there, and the feelings of thinking of Eric Meyer's class design.
I love that class.
Rich Martin with my reporting classes. The nostalgia of all that.
Yeah, man. It was so cool. And I felt like Homer Simpson in that where I'm going to get the leather pouches or the leather elbow pads I'm going to ruin 2 perfectly good jackets so I can have one just for class. But so I'm excited for that. But man, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the book. I hope that, for Illini fans, I felt like there was also kind of a dearth of material out there.
Sure.
I have Illini Legends List and Lore, which is the classic from Mike Pearson. I got all the individual season ones. Stephen Bardo, I know, has a book, but it was like, all right, let's try to get a little bit more comprehensive thing. And it's I try to make sure it's worth people's money. It's 286 pages and 30 plus years of Illini basketball. So I hope they can go down memory lane and just kind of reflect on their own experiences with it.
Encourage everybody to check it out. Go check it out. Carp, congrats on being an author, man. Hopefully one day I'll join you because it's something I definitely want to do at some point too. But that's awesome. I'm proud of you, and keep doing the good work. 200 Level Podcast as well. You can check them out on YouTube, and you got some writing people can check out too, right?
Well, yeah. So we do have a Substack. I probably do that more intermittently. Basketball, I tend to write a little bit more just because, well, it's Illini basketball. But yeah, the 200level.substack.com, YouTube, Anywhere Podcast, we're there as well. And on Twitter at Fanboy Carp and at the 200 Level.
Carp, good to see you. Good to talk with you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.